For your ears only for the week of January 19th and Martin Luther King Jr. Day, I'm David Alpern.
I'm Eddie Robinson with this quote from the news. A strong posture, even with a bit of bluff, can go a long way in stopping escalation. That was former UN Undersecretary for Peacekeeping Jean-Marie Guéhenno calling for more of promised UN military forces and diplomacy to stop the violence in South Sudan after a teenager was killed last week in an attack on one of the UN bases now sheltering 65,000 internal refugees. Now this.
In our rush to respond to a very real and novel set of threats, the risk of government overreach, the possibility that we lose some of our core liberties in pursuit of security also became more pronounced. Together, let us chart a way forward that secures the life of our nation while preserving the liberties that make our nation worth fighting for.
President Obama last week acknowledged serious privacy concerns over the government's ever-expanding electronic surveillance program since the terrorist attacks of 9/11, 2001, but also the serious concern over continuing terrorist threats at home and abroad. That he proposed reforms not fully satisfying those committed to either set of concerns is not surprising, given the complicated politics involved. And that only echoed the contradictory nature of so many national security challenges today.
In bloody Syria, the Assad regime suggested a ceasefire and more humanitarian relief that Secretary of State John Kerry saw as a diversion from peace talks in Geneva that at least some rebel forces considered a form of surrender. And the most extremist Islamic rebels are gaining strength over those Washington favors. In Afghanistan, President Hamid Karzai continued to delay signing a deal for continuing a reduced U.S. military presence, outraged anew over civilian deaths from another U.S. drone strike, even as escalating Taliban violence killed more than a dozen foreigners at a restaurant in Kabul.
Bipartisan forces in Congress, meanwhile, pushed for more sanctions on Iran that Obama argued would queer the fragile nuclear negotiations that might forestall another war. To consider these and related security issues, we're joined again by Lawrence KORB, Senior Fellow at the Center for American Progress and Assistant Secretary of Defense in the Reagan administration. Welcome back to the program.
Nice to be with you again.
Were you surprised Obama rejected so many ideas from his own panel of intel experts?
No, I wasn't, because I think what's happened is the Obama as president is much different than the Obama as the candidate, and he's become more and more, if you will, conservative or less willing to do things dramatic as his term goes on.
Obama agreed that the national security agencies should not be holding the metadata on U.S. phone calls, though he could not say who should, including the communications companies that generate it. What's your view?
Well, I don't think that they should, and I think that's the real problem, because the longer they're there and the more that you have, the more the chance for abuse. And, you know, Obama's not going to be president forever. You don't know who's going to succeed him, and if you get someone who's willing to push the envelope, then I think you're going to have some problems. And Obama left a lot of the issues open, to kind of kick the can down the road with some of the things that are going to happen. I think it's a step in the right direction, but I think we've got to be very, very careful about how far we didn't go.
Is it practical for the NSA to get court orders each time it wants to consult that data of phone numbers connected to which phone numbers for how long a time and at what time of the day?
Well, I think basically what you need is they got the FISA court, and you should have, if you will, somebody who represents the people who differ from NSA, who could make sure that the judge hears both sides of the issue. Because, I mean, again, the FISA court virtually approved everything that's been requested of them. And I think it is practical because, again, what we're talking about is, phone numbers here and information here in the United States.
How do you see Congress responding to Obama's call for cooperation in this area when the politics there last week ended up blocking his unrelated proposal to move drone operations from secret intel services to the more transparent Pentagon?
Well, I mean, obviously, it's going to make it more difficult. But I think, for example, with the drones, he can pretty much do that with executive action. He does not need the congressional permission. The only thing the Congress can do is, not give some money. But I think if he wants to do that, he can make that happen much more quickly. And I think what you're going to see is Obama, as his second term, draws, to an end, is use more and more executive action to deal with situations.
We read last week that NSA now can monitor activity on computers, even not online. And U.S. technology giants claim to be losing fortunes in foreign sales because their products are seen as bugged. Do you see that economic factor coming into play as this debate goes on?
Oh, yeah, very, very, very definitely, because, again, given what's happened here and, what has come out because of Mr. Snowden's revelations, I think you're going to see a lot of foreign companies be very careful about dealing with the United States.
Let's turn to Syria. There's talk of resuming non-lethal aid to more moderate rebels if they come to Geneva, but no guarantee it won't be grabbed by the extremists. And some see greater stability in letting Assad remain in power. What advice would you give the president?
Well, I think that what the advice I would give the non-lethal aid to the extreme, if you will, and the non-extreme, people who are fighting them, and then go ahead with the Geneva talks. It's not going to be an outcome that satisfies everybody, but I think we've really got to get the Geneva talks going, and Russia and Iran are going to, play a big role in that, and they've got other things they're concerned about, not the least of which is the whole nuclear issue with Iran and getting Iran's oil back on the market.
And on Afghanistan, as violence escalates and Karzai delays, should Washington proceed to a total withdrawal, as it did in Iraq, where ethnic and religious violence is also on the rise? And can terrorists be kept under pressure with drone strikes and SEAL team raids from outside, like the one that killed bin Laden?
Well, I think, basically at some point we've got to leave both of those countries. And, even if we had stayed, say, a couple more years in Iraq, still you're going to need a ruler, probably be a Shiite who's going to be an inclusive ruler, and that has not happened. And the same way in Afghanistan, at some point you have to leave, and it's really going to be up to them. But the real key with Karzai is he thinks we want to stay more, we need him more than vice versa. And you've got to dissuade him of that point of view, or basically you're never going to any place with the negotiations.
Turning to Iran, what impact do you see from Congress threatening new sanctions if nuclear restraints of the interim agreement starting this week are not met? Some say a careful reading suggests they can't be met.
Well, basically, I think that sends the wrong signal to the Iranians, because there are a lot of people in Iran who don't particularly think very much of us, and given the fact that we've done some things there like helping Saddam when he invaded and overthrowing their government, I think it sends the wrong signal. I don't think they understand, most countries don't understand our political process, and they think Congress wouldn't do it unless Obama let them do it. So I think it sends absolutely the wrong signal at this particular time, where we are making progress with the Iranians on the whole nuclear issue.
Lawrence KORB is a senior fellow at the Center for American Progress and Assistant Secretary of Defense in the Reagan administration.
Quote from the news, worrisome, period, full stop. That was Kathleen Hicks with the Center for Strategic and International Studies on reports that 34 officers responsible for nuclear missile launches had been suspended and their security clearances revoked for cheating on monthly proficiency tests.
Next, more on Congress, Christie, and the Supreme Court. For your ears only.